All right. Hi, everybody. Um, Welcome to this session, Recruiting and Retaining Women Leaders in Tech and the Federal Government. I'm Sarah Moffat. I am the CEO and leadership coach for Leading Ladies LLC, which is a company that's dedicated to professional coaching and leadership development specifically for women in male-dominated industries. I'm also the director for cybersecurity awareness training and external stakeholder engagement with the federal government. And today I'm here with my lovely friend and esteemed colleague, Mika Cross. Mika, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah. It's such an honor to be here. I'm Mika. I'm best known as a workplace transformation strategist extraordinaire, whatever that might mean. I come from a long background, both as an Army veteran. I've worked in the federal workforce for a long, long time and hopped over to private industry for a couple of years. I help workforce strategy. I help organizations think about putting a future forward focus on their people operations. So thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Obviously, Mika is very much an expert. And so I'm going to drive a lot of questions right to her to allow her to share her experience. So I want to start off with we're talking about recruitment and retention, right? So let's start off with recruiting women leaders in tech and the federal government. We know already, we heard this earlier in the session, that women are already significantly underrepresented in IT and cyber roles, and that women of color are even less represented. And like the last studies that I read showed that women represented anywhere from like 11 to 20% of cyber and IT roles, whereas women of color filled about 3% of those cyber and IT roles. And so there are rules in place in the federal government for how we have to do hiring. But a lot of agencies have direct hire authorities, especially for cyber roles. And I always think about the story that I heard several years ago about how this late night comedian, and I think it was Jon Stewart, he was looking for more female writers, and his recruiting team kept bringing him resumes that were for men, and they were saying we're putting out job postings, but it's still men that are responding. And it wasn't until they specifically put out job postings for female writers did they get the response that they were looking for. So for me, if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking that it is critically important that the public sector and the private sector do more, right? We learned about setting intentions, but turning those into action, doing more than just talking about diversity and hiring, but that they make it a primary and significant recruiting strategy to specifically recruit females and for diversity. So Mika, what's your take on this? How do we recruit better?
Look, several decades ago, the EEOC and MSPB came out with, that's the Merit Systems Protection Board, which guides personnel practices and prohibited personnel practices also for the federal space, but came out with a report that really highlighted 5 key areas that affect women in the workforce. And the number one issue was inflexible work policies. So want to know a really easy strategy for trying to attract women into your workforce? It's to take a look at those darn job descriptions, the position descriptions, and really highlight upfront what kind of supportive workplace programs and policies do you want women to know about? Do you have on-site childcare? Do you have emergency backup care? Do you offer a variety of flexible work schedules? Is telework or remote work an option? Put it as part of your employer branding strategy. Yes, federal agencies, you can do it. You can rewrite your position descriptions and talk about what a great place it is to work if in fact it is so. If it's not, and you have a culture that claims to have these policies and programs in place, but it's not accessible to people because of the workplace culture, you need to relook at who you're hiring into your leadership roles. Secondly, Sarah, I think it's really important and key to train HR and hiring managers for unconscious bias and stereotypes when screening women applicants. I'll say that again. You want to train human resources and your hiring managers to make sure they can identify their biases and stereotypes when it comes to screening women or those who identify as women candidates, especially when you're looking at your recruitment strategy. So those are things like, in the main session we talked about, which is identifying maybe gaps in employment. Consider the pandemic impact on working mothers and caregivers to the tune of billions of dollars in economy with regards to women being able to work, because of issues with caregiving and childcare. If you can do those simple things, you can make a difference in trying to attract and retain the kind of top talent that you want. And the third thing, again, is around that culture piece, okay? If you are sitting there, and I don't care if you're a man or a woman in a leadership position, we talked about male buy-in too, helping to make an issue. But if that is a workplace that rewards people on long hours and putting in time versus impact and quality of work, you're barking up the wrong tree if you're really thinking about changing the strategy of your workforce initiatives to be attractive to women in the workplace.
Dang. It's like power, power, power. It seems easy, right? It seems easy to do those things, but I listen to this guy and he always says, just because it's common sense doesn't mean it's common practice, right? So I'm also thinking that as we are recruiting more diversely and putting that specific focus out there, we need to make sure that we're creating clear leadership paths and career paths, which a lot of the ladies in the previous session talked about. And so women and women of color are, even more underrepresented in leadership roles. And if we don't make creating leadership pathways a clear priority, we're going to continue to lose out on significant talent. Because people that are in those middle management jobs, they are going to leave and they are going to go to private industry, or they're going to go to other organizations that do offer that kind of thing. So we're going to lose the talent. We're going to lose innovation. We're going to lose the creative and diverse leadership that we need in IT and cyber. So, here we are, Mika, we're at the end of the year one of a global pandemic. And I think we really need to talk about that a little bit more and talk about the landscape and what has occurred in hiring and retaining women because of the pandemic. So can you talk about the data, like the current and the previous landscape because of the pandemic, and what we as leaders can do to create an environment that's more conducive to women, not only continuing in the workspace, but leading in the workspace?
Yeah, I can. In fact, I'll keep it simple, right? Because we only have a few minutes. But in the past year alone, about 3 million women have dropped out of the active civilian labor force. 3 million women in the last 12 months.
That makes me choke.
It is, yeah, it's mind blowing. And let me tell you something. These are working women of all races, ethnicity, background, parental status, age, occupation. But single mothers and women of color have been hit the hardest. There is such thing as career privilege. Career privilege meaning positions like yours and mine, Sarah, that could easily transfer because it's knowledge work primarily to a remote or work from home position and
Absolutely.
posture.
Yeah.
Many women actually hold other kinds of positions in industries that were hit really hard, like the service industry, hospitality industry, and those kinds of occupations. And the reason why they do is because they have options like part-time work and different kinds of work schedules that will allow them to balance and juggle all of those things. I should not say balance because it is a juggle struggle. I think we all can agree. So if you're thinking about how the impact of the pandemic on women in the workforce can affect your leadership strategy in your organizations right now, whether you're a federal entity or not, as an employer, you need to consider that when you're grooming and you're developing your workforce, typically, as you mentioned, Sarah, you're going to pluck from the middle. But if you don't even have a middle to pluck from, meaning you're not doing well at the front end in recruiting and hiring women into your entry level and mid-level career pathways, even to begin with, you're not going to have a middle to develop, let alone those who are there and maybe can't sustain staying in your workplace or don't want to because of the culture barriers that we were talking about. So it's a real consideration when you're thinking about, people, culture, and strategy. And I loved what all the powerhouse women were saying about, there's a big, big difference between mentorship and sponsorship and training and development and your own personal P's, and your passion and purpose, those intersections. But sometimes you're not in the right place or your workplace isn't in the right place. So you want to know a step you can take even at all levels. It's to stop hiding what we need as women in the workplace. I decided a few years ago to stop making excuses in terms of hiding why I needed to leave early sometimes or why I might need to come in late sometimes. And I would tell my team that as a supervisor, I was no longer going to slide around the hallway if I had to leave early to go pick up my children. I was going to let people know I'm taking leave or I'm leaving early and I'll change my work schedule. And I started messaging that a lot more because I wanted to also give other people permission that this is a reality. And if anything that the last 12 months have proven to us, it is that we have to take a more humanizing approach to work, or else we will lose talent. We will lose people and they cannot sustain the pace and also the energy of what it takes to work during a crisis and sustain operations and continue government continuity also. I'm so sorry to hear that some of you have lost your positions also during this time.
Yeah. It's it has been, and I have seen that firsthand, that organizations that have been that have allowed for that communication piece, that have allowed people to admit that they needed support, have fared much better, right? I'm a single mother, and when the pandemic hit, I was just out of surgery. I was in grad school full time, and now I've got a 5-year-old home with me from preschool full time, and I had to do the same thing. Like, hey, I'm going to work 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. and I'm going to have to break from 9 to noon. And then I'll be back on when nap time starts. Right. And so my day is, I saw a great meme that had Dolly Parton and it said, working 9 to 9:15,
Yeah.
10 to 10:45. And I was like, yep, that's me. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And so like, it's obvious that if we are not, and so for me, leadership is about intentionality and it's about consistency. And I think that we are calling on our leaders and we are calling on ourselves as leaders to be intentional and consistent. And if we're not, there's going to be repercussions. If we are not intentionally recruiting, if we are not intentionally creating those workplace flexibilities, if we are not intentionally and consistently updating our PDs, updating our policies, and recognizing that telework, like, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, we're going to go back to normal. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Back to normal is not going to happen. So we need our leaders to be intentional about this mind shift and to be consistent in the efforts. And I read somewhere that if we don't do something fast, and Mika, I really want you to talk about this, we're going to be set back 30 to 40 years when it comes to our advances in gender equality, women in the professional ranks, women in leadership positions. Like, according to everything I'm reading, we know we've already lost, you said 3 million jobs, a disproportionate number of jobs. So how do we keep women from attrition because of the pandemic, Mika?
Okay, well, I did talk a little bit about those policies and making certain that you're really reviewing them to match strategic flexibility to your operational resilience posture. In the federal space, you mentioned hiring, right? Restrictions, but there are a number of non-competitive hiring pathways that
Yeah.
you can leverage in order to bring in top talent really a lot quicker than you would through the traditional pathways. The federal government had an executive order, which still stands, to hire more military spouses. Guess what? Military spouses are about 90% women. 90% women are military spouses. But because of the transient lifestyle, without the right kind of telework or work life kind of flexibilities available to them, they won't be able to come into your workforce. So it's a moot point. But if you really mean what you say and you're wanting to leverage some of those strategic non-competitive hiring programs to your advantage for the purpose of attracting and retaining women, look there. Look at your pathways programs. What schools are you recruiting from? How are you engaging with communities? What about rural communities? I mean, quite frankly, this is an easy win for any workplace to leverage this kind of flexibility, even as part of your recovery strategy. And for the
Right.
federal government at large, when you're trying to build public trust, rebuild public trust in the services that we deliver to the American taxpayer, being able to bring jobs to remote and rural locations where otherwise people have been disenfranchised and not had access to employment opportunities like the federal government offers to the tune of 2.1 million jobs. These are strategies for people to be able to bring. Um,
100%.
Uh-huh. And with COVID, again, in the federal space and in other workplaces too, I mean, we have learned to adapt and become much more agile. So again, messaging what you offer in terms of flexibility and in terms of leave and in terms of employee assistance programs or mental health support or physical
Mhm.
wellness and safety and all of those things that, when you have a workplace that supports all of those components of your people, they are going to, by virtue of that, bring their best work when and where and how they do work best. So it's really important that you, I think, start there, look at your position descriptions and rewrite them in plain language and really tout those kinds of offerings, if you have them, that will attract more women into the ranks. And then taking a look at your professional development career pathways, making sure that they are equitable, that they're not accidentally opting out people of color, and that they are not, that your workplace isn't only hiring women into support roles, that they are in fact being very deliberate into bringing women into mission critical occupations.
That's all very practical, all very actionable. And one thing that Mika and I did a podcast together a couple weeks ago, and one of the things that I have been stuck on is something I hadn't even thought of, Mika, that, and you said it just now. You said we need to be more vocal about our needs and not be ashamed of those needs. And
Mhm.
I think that requires a level of vulnerability that many women in the workplace have not been willing to go to. But I think we need to, because a lot of times, the point that I'm trying to make is, a lot of time these decision makers are past their child rearing years. They are more senior. They're not thinking about the challenges that we're facing now. That's not in their mindset. So the more vocal we are about not only our needs as far as being care providers and mothers and things like that, but what we need as far as telework, maybe we're taking care of aging parents. There's a lot of things going on right now, and you've got to be able to be in a space, hopefully safely, that you can express um, your needs to your leadership.
I
So
mean,
we obviously
absolutely.
go ahead.
I was going to say too, the impact of the pandemic on the workforce at large, not just specifically for women, but quite frankly, women have also taken a hit on mental health and
Yeah,
stress over the past 12 months. And so when you're thinking about reintegrating women back into a workforce, whether it be back in an office or in a hybrid, solution, having options for remote work and other flexibilities really allow, again, that choice for people to feel safe if the position allows for it. And that really does also go back to building competencies of leadership in the terms of supervisors and managers being able to manage all sorts of flexibilities in a multi-generational workforce that's diverse and inclusive.
absolutely. So I'm just popping over here to the chat. How do you find out about direct hire opportunities in the federal government? So um, if you go onto USA Jobs, you can type in the first box 2210. Those are all federal IT cybersecurity jobs. Many of them will say direct hire authority when you're looking at the results. So that's how you know those are direct hire type roles. Um, so that's what I wanted to. And then there's some that'll say NTE, that means not to exceed, and that'll be like 1 year or 2 years or whatever. So that's how you can tell what those are. um,
There's
Work-life balance has
veteran
shifted.
there's veteran hiring
Yes,
pathways. So if you have served in the military, that's another non-competitive. If you're a recent graduate within 2 years of graduating from any kind of degree,
pathways.
whether it's a
Mhm.
doctorate or master's degree, that's another student pathways program, student hiring
Yeah.
programs. And then if you're a qualified individual with a disability, and that can mean hidden disabilities, not just physical disabilities. So
Mhm.
it does behoove you to be brave and self-identify, because you just might be qualified for a position and be able to come in under those categories.
Yep. Great points. Um, so thank you. I think we're running quickly out of time. I am so glad that you guys are here. We obviously have a lot of work ahead of us. And so as we're closing out today, I just want to encourage you, um, if you're watching live or if you're watching the replay, to step up in your leadership, to step up and be willing to speak out, because we have a lot of opportunities here and a lot of ground to recover. And it's going to be It's going to be us acting courageously with intention and strategy and consistently showing up, not only for our teams, but like we talked about, for other women. So, Mika, I just wanted to give you an opportunity. If you want people to learn more about you, do you have like a social page or something that you want to share with the group?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is my platform, so feel free to connect with me there. Also on Twitter. And Sarah, I know people are looking for that link to our podcast that we did. I'll put my profile in the chat as well.
Okay. So it's leadingladies.co podcasts is where you can see our podcasts, and you'll see it there with Mika, me and Mika. So there's that. And did you put your LinkedIn profile in
I'm doing
there?
it right now, and this really is my profile link. I am work life champion of the universe.
Of course you are. Of course you are. Okay. And if you guys want to reach me, you can find me on Insta at Leading Ladies Co. And I'll put my LinkedIn in there as well. So thank you all so much. Do we have time for questions, or do we need to bump back to the other room?
There is a few minutes left. I think the time frame was 5:40. So if anybody would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, but if you both need to leave as well, that's fine. But if anybody would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, or if there's a question in the chat that you think is important to answer, then you might.
Yeah, I'd like to answer Venice's question about how we can encourage OPM to change the position designations tool. I think that you can do it easier, Venice, and that is in partnership with your HR. Did you know, and I really didn't know this before a few years ago, but supervisors and managers can request to review all of the position descriptions on their team and update them even once a year. In fact, it's actually a best practice to try to do that around performance appraisal time, because that also helps you do succession planning, meaning you can review those position descriptions for people that are filling those jobs right now. I like to do that because then it allows me to update them with expectations that otherwise maybe I didn't have for them a year or two ago, especially in the tech field that emerges and changes all the time. And then if someone leaves, it allows you to have a more updated and modern position description. And there are areas on that PD, Venice, that you can request HR add in. You can change some of the language. You can add some like finesse to your PDs. And I would encourage you to try to reach out. I mean, you have a lot of influence. Clearly, you have a lot of respect in your organization. It takes people like you to make that request and make it happen and insist on it. And then other people might follow.
And you're right. What I was hoping was that OPM would almost, because of the flexibility that we have now been able to realize under COVID, and the one thing that we're really bragging about is that even though we're in a pandemic, everyone was at home, technology was so great, and all of the work continued. Well, great. That's a great banner, right? And it's a good soundbite. But now I need organizations, and I mean federal government, now to honor those words, because now why are you bringing everyone back to the office? With the exception of, I do recognize there is a circle of life here that happens, right? We need the government to buy buildings or to lease buildings so that there's companies can make money, and then they can hire the janitors, or
Right.
have the cafe. So I understand there's a circle of like an economic circle there. But the reason I was talking about the PDD tool being pushed down, so that oftentimes when OPM sets policy, and then that last line that says implementation instructions from your agency,
Yeah,
every agency then does it so differently
they do.
that in order to benefit, you need to move. So right above that implementation line, I'd like them to say there's a mandatory block for, no kidding, justify why this work cannot be done at home.
I love that.
Or
I
at different
think you are
hours.
spot on. We need to reverse engineer not why we should be entitled to request telework, but what is the business reason for having to be in office space.
Absolutely.
You are spot on. I was on a meeting earlier today with OPM, OMB, political leaders from the Senior Executive Association, SEA, and NAPA, and Partnership for Public Service. Wait until that FEVS data comes out, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. It's coming out right now. Wait until you see 5 and 10% increases over the past year, even during the pandemic, because there's a correlation to remote work and telework. Follow the data, Venice, and show your leaders that they need to pay attention, because you're spot on.
Hey, Dixie, you had a
I
question?
have a question. Yeah, I have a question. What I'm basically was my kids are grown, and a lot of folks, you fail to realize, yes, I've done your chapter, I've raised my kids and all, but now some of these people have got grandkids are in the same boat as you are. And just right now, as you're trying to struggle, I struggled, I made it. But now there's a lot of us still want to stay in the government and now want to stay home as a retiree, but not retiree is I can't retire until I die. So bottom line is I want to be able to work for the federal government and work telework. I don't want to drive to town every day. And you get more and more people that are willing to work and want to work. You're going to have a very, very productive organization.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. And Venus is a great example of senior executive leadership within the federal government that is thinking forward. And we just need to kind of pull the rest of them along with us, because I still hear from SESs that, can't wait to bring everybody back to the office. And I still hear, well, we're not sure that this telework is working in the right way. And some people prefer to believe what they prefer to be true, honestly. And
well,
so
the old guard says, well, if I didn't get to do it, why should you? I'm like, I would probably have, our kids would be a lot more stronger, and we would know exactly what our kids are doing if we didn't have to do the commute and we didn't have to do a balance all the entire time. We'd have less social problems.
The choir here, honestly. Yeah. I mean, we're with you. Mika's with you. I'm with you. You're preaching to the choir, and we're advocating for you. We're speaking out as much as we can. And so hopefully you feel heard.
And I think there's some really good news here to share too, Dixie and Sarah, in the terms of whatever your political affiliations are. Let's face it, this administration is a new administration, and they are really excited about putting the focus and spotlight back on well-being for the federal workforce. There's a lot of attention, even in terms of remote work and telework expansion for the intelligence community, which is where I got my start. Those are for people with top secret clearances who often work in a secure compartmental, infrastructure facility. And so I suspect you're going to see more legislation similar to the Telework Enhancement Act of 2010. I suspect it's going to be linked to data and cost savings and employee engagement. So hang in there, Dixie, because I think a change is a coming.
I really do, because the thing is I live in Alaska, and I have to commute to town to the bases an hour, and it depends on the weather. And I'm at that point where is it really worth to stay with the government or not? When we've already demonstrated to the government we can do our jobs, and we're actually more productive. But we've got to change the old guard's thinking. And as up here in Alaska, we still have the man's world and man rules. You guys are very, I wish we could have been who you are right now. For a lot of us in my age, could have spoken out, and we'd had change. You guys wouldn't be enduring these problems right now.
Good point.
You look at and I've done other things. And the thing is we need to get back to the family. The family comes first. Our jobs come second.
I agree. I saw that great meme. I think it was from Mother Teresa's, like, if you don't fix it here and it's a home, you can't fix it there, which is the world, And so it's so true. I 100% agree with you. I am also a single mom, and my youngest has some special needs that I did not know until I was working at USDA, Venus, a decade ago, leading the telework and work-life programs as part of the Department of Agriculture's cultural transformation. I don't think I would have survived. And I think my son right now to this day is benefiting from the fact that I had the flexibility to take him to all of those early interventions. So I'm a huge advocate for also how flexible working can assist caregivers and parents, especially those who have medical conditions and unique circumstances on top of already a challenge work-life scenario.
And allowing grandparents, if they're still working with the federal government, allowing them telecommute so you can be helped by grandpa and grandma.
That's a really good point too, Sarah. One other thing I just wanted to mention to Dixie's point is that the federal government also has reemployed annuitant programs, and they also have part-time retirement programs that they can offer. Those are very underutilized programs, but consider if we were going to integrate some of retirement eligible folks in our ranks to help with the mentoring, shadowing, professional
Oh,
development, leveraging that institutional and tacit knowledge from experienced seasoned workers to the younger workforce. What if that was Dixie's job? What if that was your job on your last 5 years and you could do it remotely? That could be another way that agencies creatively think about developmental programs for women and a diverse workforce.
And that's what they use for SCORE. People that run businesses, they use the SCORE program, and there's a lot out there. And actually, people have a lot of great knowledge and they want to give, but they can't because of, you know, all the limitations. But we're a multi-generational workforce. We have to start learning how to work together.
absolutely.
Thank you so much. This was so incredible. Thank you, Dixie. Thank you, Venus. Thank you, Sarah and Mika, for sharing such incredible insights on, you know, and even highlighting that when women return back to the workforce with COVID, these disabilities can be hidden, and there's just so much still to be worked on, but there's so much that is being implemented now that we should be proud of, but there's always things that, you know, we can be proud of moving forward. So I just want to thank you both for coming on and sharing such incredible insights. And please, everyone, look at the podcast that Mika and Sarah had, because I know I will be too. And I just want to thank you so much. This was absolutely incredible, and I learned so much. So thank you so very much. And yeah, if anyone would like to go to the mural board to discuss further, that will still be open. But I just wanted to thank you very much, and thank you everybody for participating. This was great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Take
Bye
care.
bye. Thank you.
Here.
Bye, Charity.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.